From the stark, sun-baked slopes of Mount Parnassus, where a jagged fissure scarred the earth, rose one of the ancient world's most enduring and terrifying powers, the Oracle of Delphi. For over 1,000 years, kings, generals, philosophers, and commoners alike trekked the arduous paths to this sacred sanctuary, desperate for a glimpse into the inscrutable future. They sought divine guidance, a whisper from Apollo himself, to navigate the brutal currents of war, colonization, political intrigue, and personal despair. What they found often was not divine clarity, but something far more insidious, more profoundly human, and ultimately, terrifyingly manipulative. Imagine, if you will, the supplicant's journey. Weeks, perhaps months, of travel across unforgiving landscapes, the air growing thin and cool as you ascend Parnassus, the scent of wild herbs mingling with the distant promise of sanctity. As you approach the sacred precinct, the sheer scale of the Temple of Apollo, the treasury houses gleaming with offerings, the statues of victorious athletes, it all builds an overwhelming sense of awe and expectation. This was not merely a pilgrimage. It was an ordeal, designed to break down the mundane and open the mind to the extraordinary. You have invested everything, your time, your wealth, your hopes, in this moment. And Delphi knew it. Delphi preyed upon it. The very heart of this ancient deception, or divine theater as some would argue, was the Pythia. A woman, often a virgin or an older woman of impeccable character, chosen to be Apollo's mouthpiece. We have vivid, though often conflicting, accounts of her ritual. First, a purification. Bathing in the Castalian spring, perhaps chewing laurel leaves believed to have intoxicating properties. Then, into the Adyton, the inner sanctum of the temple, a place shrouded in mystery and accessible only to the priests and the Pythia herself. Here, near the fabled Omphalos, the navel of the world, she would sit upon a tripod, poised above the chasm from which, it was believed, intoxicating vapors arose. Contemporary descriptions paint a picture of profound, often violent, transformation. The Pythia would enter a trance, her body convulsing, eyes rolling back, a guttural cacophony escaping her lips, a mix of groans, shouts, and seemingly incoherent babbling. Was it the gases from the earth, as some modern theories suggest? Was it psychological conditioning, the immense pressure of embodying the divine, leading to a dissociative state? Or was it a masterful performance, perfected over centuries to inspire terror and reverence in equal measure? Whatever the cause, the effect was undeniable. The Pythia appeared possessed, truly otherworldly. But the Pythia's fragmented utterances were not the prophecies themselves. They were merely the raw, unrefined material. The true architects of Delphi's manipulative power were the male priests, the propheti who stood beside her. These men, steeped in the sacred traditions, versed in the political landscape of Greece, and armed with an astonishing intelligence network, were the interpreters. They took the Pythia's seemingly random cries, her distorted words, and molded them into coherent, often poetic, often chilling, and almost always ambiguous pronouncements. It was in this interpretation, this translation from divine chaos to human language, that the true manipulation lay. Consider the priest's strategic advantage. Pilgrims arrived at Delphi not just with questions, but with stories. They spoke of their city's rivalries, their leaders' ambitions, their military strengths and weaknesses, their personal anxieties. They brought offerings, not just gold and silver, but information. The priests, seemingly detached from earthly affairs, were in fact privy to a vast, unparalleled reservoir of intelligence from across the Hellenic world. They knew the political winds, the likely outcomes of conflicts, the psychological profiles of the rulers seeking their advice. And they used this knowledge not to provide clear answers, but to craft prophecies so cunningly vague, so elegantly double-edged, that they could be interpreted in multiple ways, guaranteeing Delphi's infallibility, no matter the outcome. The terror of Delphi's manipulation stemmed from this ingenious ambiguity. The oracle never truly committed. It offered pronouncements that appeared profound, yet shifted meaning depending on the listener's perspective or the eventual turn of events. This wasn't merely hedging. it was a psychological weapon. It forced the supplicant to confront their deepest fears and desires, projecting them onto the oracle's words. It made them complicit in their own destiny, or their own downfall. Perhaps the most infamous example of Delphi's terrifyingly manipulative ambiguity is the story of Croesus, the fabulously wealthy king of Lydia, around 550 BCE. Croesus, facing the rising might of the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great, was gripped by a profound existential dread. He sent lavish gifts, mountains of gold and silver, to Delphi, seeking a definitive answer. Should he wage war against Persia? The oracle's response was delivered, meticulously interpreted by the priests, and recorded for posterity. If Croesus attacks the Persians, he will destroy a great empire. Croesus, a man of immense power and perhaps even greater hubris, interpreted this as a direct divine endorsement. Naturally, he believed he would destroy the Persian Empire. He saw only triumph in the oracle's words, blind to the chilling possibility of an alternative. He launched his army against Cyrus, confident in Apollo's blessing. The ensuing conflict was a catastrophe for Lydia. Croesus's forces were routed, his capital, Sardis, besieged and captured. His great empire was indeed destroyed, but it was his own. The chilling genius of this prophecy lies in its absolute truth, regardless of the outcome. If Croesus had won, he would have destroyed the Persian Empire, and the oracle would have been hailed as prescient. Since he lost, he destroyed his own empire, and the oracle remained infallible. Delphi suffered no loss of prestige, no damage to its divine authority. Croesus, however, lost everything. The psychological impact of realizing you were the architect of your own destruction, meticulously guided by a prophecy that seemed to promise victory but actually offered a trap, must have been devastating. It was a prophecy designed not to enlighten, but to ensnare, a testament to Delphi's masterful exploitation of human ambition and certainty. Another classic example of Delphi's strategic ambiguity emerged during the existential threat of the Persian Wars, specifically facing the immense invasion of Xerxes in 480 BCE. The Athenians, desperate and terrified, sent envoys to Delphi. Their first prophecy was utterly bleak, a pronouncement of doom that offered no hope. "Fly, fly to the ends of the earth, for fire and furious Ares ride in a chariot of flame, and the great city shall be consumed." It was a message calculated to induce panic and perhaps drive Athenians to abandon their city. But Themistocles, the brilliant Athenian statesman and general, urged the envoys to seek a second, more favorable prophecy. The oracle relented, offering a revised, though still cryptic, message. "Though all else within the bounds of Cecrops and the hollow of Cithaeron shall fall, Zeus grants to the wooden wall to be alone uncaptured, which shall preserve thee and thy children." And then, a final, unsettling line, "Divine Salamis, you will bring death to mother's sons." This prophecy, like Croesus's, was a masterpiece of calculated vagueness. Wooden wall. What did it mean? Some argued it referred to the ancient wooden palisade that protected the Acropolis. Others suggested it meant the city walls. Themistocles, however, with his strategic mind, and perhaps some prior intelligence, interpreted wooden wall as the Athenian navy. He argued passionately that their salvation lay in their ships, and that divine Salamis hinted at a naval battle where the Persians would suffer. This interpretation led to the fateful decision to evacuate Athens, allowing the Persians to sack the city, but drawing their vast fleet into the narrow straits of Salamis. The ensuing naval battle was a monumental Athenian victory that turned the tide of the Persian Wars. The oracle's prophecy was fulfilled. The wooden walls had indeed saved Athens, and Salamis had seen the destruction of many mothers' sons. But imagine the terror of that choice. The risk, the agonizing debate. The oracle did not provide a clear directive, but rather a puzzle that forced the Athenians to commit to a high-stakes interpretation. Had Themistocles interpreted it differently, had the battle gone awry, Delphi would still have been correct. The wooden wall would have simply been interpreted as the walls of Athens themselves, which would have fallen. And the oracle would have blamed Athenian folly for not understanding. This was not divine foresight. It was a shrewd, calculated gamble that leveraged the Athenians' own desperation and intellect against them. Even more chilling was the prophecy delivered to the Spartans during the same Persian invasion. Faced with the overwhelming might of Xerxes, the Spartans sought Apollo's counsel. The oracle's response was brutal and stark, offering a horrifying dilemma. "Hear this, O inhabitants of Sparta of the wide spaces. Either your glorious city shall be sacked by the sons of Perseus, or, if that is not to be, then the land of Lacedaemon shall mourn the death of a king, a descendant of great Heracles." This was not ambiguous in its outcome, but terrifying in its choice. Sparta would either fall, or a king would die. It presented a direct, unavoidable sacrifice. King Leonidas, a descendant of Heracles, understood the grim implication. He led his legendary 300 Spartans to Thermopylae, a narrow pass, knowing they were marching to their deaths. Their heroic stand bought critical time for the rest of Greece, but it also fulfilled the prophecy in the most literal and bloody way possible. In this instance, Delphi offered no escape, only a preordained, tragic outcome. It was a prophecy designed to instill profound fatalism, to ensure that the sacrifice was seen not just as military strategy, but as divine imperative. It solidified the Spartans' resolve, yes, but at an unimaginable human cost. It was a prophecy that served to justify, perhaps even necessitate, a monumental act of self-annihilation for the greater good, a terrifying manipulation of courage and devotion. Beyond these grand, well-documented historical moments, Delphi's manipulative influence permeated countless other aspects of ancient Greek life. Consider the widespread practice of consulting the oracle before founding a new colony. A city-state, facing overpopulation, famine, or internal strife, would send emissaries to Delphi for a blessing and direction. The oracle might respond with a vague geographical hint, "Found a city where 2 rivers meet," or "Seek the land where a sow gives birth to piglets with a golden fleece." These were often so general that the colonists would have to search for years, encountering countless hardships, until they finally found a suitable location that could then be retroactively fitted to the prophecy. This process reinforced the oracle's authority, as the eventual success of the colony was attributed to Apollo's guidance, even if the guidance was maddeningly obscure. It's easy to imagine the desperation driving these colonial ventures. Men, women, and children uprooting their lives, sailing into the unknown. The oracle's pronouncements, however vague, provided a crucial psychological anchor, a sense of divine sanction for their perilous journey. It was a masterful use of hope, disguised as direction, to achieve political and demographic ends. Delphi's political sway was immense. It was common for city-states to vie for influence over the oracle, showering gifts upon the temple and cultivating relationships with the priests. The priests, in turn, were not above accepting bribes or allowing political allegiances to color their interpretations. Historical accounts hint at occasions when the oracle seemed to shift its stance depending on which city-state was currently in favor, or which alliance was seen as most beneficial to Delphi's long-term interests. For example, during the Peloponnesian War, the oracle's pronouncements often seemed to favor Sparta over Athens, perhaps because Sparta was more consistently aligned with Delphi's conservative, traditional leanings, or simply because Spartan wealth and influence were more substantial at the time. This was not the unbiased voice of a god. It was a sophisticated political player, using divine authority as a tool for leverage. The oracle's manipulative power also extended to individual fates, often with psychologically devastating consequences. Imagine a man accused of murder seeking the oracle's absolution, or a woman desperate for a child asking about her fertility. The prophecies might be phrased in such a way as to amplify their guilt or despair, or to offer a glimmer of hope that, if unfulfilled, would leave them utterly broken. The priests were master psychologists, able to read the anxieties and hopes of their supplicants, and tailor their interpretations to maximize impact, often reinforcing existing social norms or moral dictates under the guise of divine will. Consider the Pythia herself, the tragic vessel of this manipulative power. What was her experience? Was she a willing participant in the deception, or a true believer exploited by the priestly caste? The physical and psychological toll must have been immense. The constant pressure, the forced trances, the expectation of channeling the divine, the knowledge that her incomprehensible utterances would be shaped into life or death pronouncements for empires. Some accounts suggest the Pythia's role could lead to madness, or at least a profound detachment from reality. She was a sacred object, revered yet simultaneously dehumanized, a tool in the hands of the priests and the ambitions of men. The terrifying manipulation extended not just to the external world, but to the very instrument of prophecy itself. Even Alexander the Great, with his indomitable will, encountered Delphi's carefully constructed authority. Upon arriving at Delphi around 336 BCE, eager for a prophecy to legitimize his grand campaign against Persia, he found the Pythia reluctant to prophesy for him. It was a day deemed unlucky for prophecy. Alexander, famously impatient and unwilling to be denied, reportedly dragged the Pythia by her hair towards the Adyton. In her struggle and protest, she cried out, "My son, you are invincible!" Alexander, seizing the moment, declared this outburst his prophecy. He didn't need a convoluted, ambiguous pronouncement. He forced a simple, powerful declaration of his destined greatness. This incident, whether entirely true or embellished by legend, is revealing. It shows the limits of Delphi's manipulation when confronted by overwhelming force and a refusal to play by the established rules. Alexander, unlike Croesus, did not seek interpretation. He demanded affirmation. And in a strange way, even this forced prophecy served Delphi, as it eventually came to be seen as a legitimate pronouncement for the conqueror who changed the world. It demonstrated Delphi's ability to adapt, to co-opt even defiance into its own narrative of divine authority. The question arises, why did Delphi maintain such profound influence for over a millennium despite its evident ambiguity and manipulative tactics? The answer lies in the deep human need for certainty in an uncertain world. In an era before scientific understanding, when natural disasters, disease, and war seemed arbitrary and uncontrollable, the Oracle offered a framework, a seemingly divine explanation, or at least a guiding hand. Even an ambiguous answer was better than no answer, for it forced action, decision, and provided a rationale for the outcome, whatever it may be. Furthermore, the Oracle's prophecies, however vague, often held a kernel of truth derived from the vast intelligence gathered by the priests. If the priests predicted conflict, it was likely because they had heard rumors from multiple city-states on the brink of war. If they advised colonization, it was likely because they understood the demographic and economic pressures driving such ventures. They were not merely guessing, they were making highly educated, politically astute predictions, cloaked in divine mystique. The sheer awe-inspiring spectacle of Delphi also played a crucial role. The dramatic setting, the elaborate rituals, the apparent possession of the Pythia, the history of successful prophecies, all contributed to an atmosphere of profound reverence that discouraged skepticism. To question the oracle was to question Apollo himself, a dangerous and impious act. In essence, Delphi was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. It played on hope, fear, ambition, and desperation. It presented choices as destiny and human error as divine fulfillment. It cultivated an aura of inscrutability that ensured its ultimate infallibility. The Pythia's incoherent cries, filtered through the cunning minds of the priests, became the very fabric of ancient Greek history, shaping not just the fate of kings and empires, but the very psychological landscape of a civilization. The legacy of the Oracle of Delphi is not merely one of divine wisdom or spiritual guidance. It is a stark, fascinating testament to the enduring power of belief, the cunning of human intellect, and the terrifying effectiveness of carefully crafted ambiguity. It reminds us that even the most sacred institutions can be wielded as instruments of pra.ga, a found influence, shaping the course of human events through fear, hope, and the desperate yearning for a definitive word from the unknown. The oracle did not merely predict history. It often, in its terrifyingly manipulative way, made it.